Thank you so much, everyone, for coming this evening. We're so happy to have you guys. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come to this event. A couple things that I would like to start off with is this event is sponsored by FIT Diversity Collective for Black History Month. So we really want to give a special thank you to Deliwe Kikana and her team. She is the interim chief diversity officer here at FIT. And she granted us this opportunity, so we really want to thank them for that. So thank you so much, we appreciate it. So yes, let me get in a little bit about what this particular event is and the purpose of it. The name of this is The New Stereotype. It's a transformative project that began in 2015, and I'll be introducing them, and they'll introduce themselves here shortly. It started in 2015 with the aim of really reshaping the narrative around Black individuals in America, and is using photography and fashion. So at the heart of TNS lies Stories, which is the book that they have written. It is a wonderful book that is been published. It's a year-long narrative journey that honors this multifaceted tapestry of Black life in America, skillfully woven through the mediums of fashion, photography, and film. So Stories, which is the name of this particular book, unfolds as a composition of diverse chapters, and each really illuminating this unique and authentic life of narratives of Black men and women. The chapter covers topics from fashion, diaspora, ancestry, Black hair and beauty, to parenthood, to adversity, incarceration, globetrotting, masculinity, parenthood, and beyond. It is really unpacks a lot of categories. And at this panel discussion, myself, I'm an assistant professor here at FIT. My name is Keith Fraley. We also have Adjunct Professor Donald Pollard. He's also here at FIT. And I also want to change it over to ever so slightly to our guests so they can introduce themselves. The first one we have is Marquel Turner Gilchrist, and he can give a brief introduction of himself.
Perfect. First of all, greetings from Los Angeles. I know it looks like I'm in New York with all this Black, but I lived in New York for 6 years, so the New Yorker kind of never leaves you, I would say. So that's why I'm dressed in Black, and it's a pleasure to be here. As people, I'm Marquel Turner Gilchrist. I am the founder of the New Stereotype, and I serve as project director for the New Stereotype Stories. And essentially, in this capacity, Stories, the editorial, essentially serving as during all the moving parts came together, and what I would say in such a beautiful way in execution of this. Our business partner, Olushola Basharan, who wasn't able to make it because other event happening at a media agency called Wavemaker at the exact same time, is the director of photography. He's been on this journey with me from the beginning, 2015. So as Keith mentioned, it started out simply as a photo series just to highlight the diversity initially of Black men, expanded into Black women, then it became a bit more elevated with this editorial book, I would say. I'll pause there and let Wendy do an introduction.
And I'm Wendy Oure, and I'm the creative director of the project. I came in, honestly, I started as a volunteer, and then down the line, I was able to kind of take over the creative direction, and it's honestly been a journey, and of course, you'll hear more about it today.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And as I stated, there is a third member, but he wasn't able to join. One thing that I want to remind everyone is to really use the hashtag. If you are posting this on any of the social media platforms, if you can use the hashtag The New Stereotype, also FIT Diversity, if you can also include that within your social media handle. So thank you so much, and I'll come over and we can start with some questions here. So thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you here finally. I'm so happy we've been working so hard for this to happen. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, Marquel, is can you really tell us how did you know at some point that each other how did everyone come together for this particular project? What was your thought process in unpacking that, and how did that materialize to the point of where it is now?
Yes, great question. So, I worked in fashion for many years when I lived in New York. In fact, that's why I moved to New York. So I'm originally from a very small rural town in North Carolina called Johnsonville. I went to graduate school in the south of France, and after returning from France, I knew if I truly wanted to work in fashion, I had to leave North Carolina and move to New York. So I moved to New York, and at that time, I started to work for Hugo Boss. I was in buying, so buying and merchandising, and that kind of was like the bulk of my career. So I did buying and merchandising for Hugo Boss. I moved to the Middle East for 3 years, where I helped open the largest luxury department store in the Middle East for 3 years. I came back. I went back in a larger capacity to work for Hugo Boss, overseeing men's buying occasions for the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Brazil. And then I went on to work for Gucci, where I oversaw the strategy for men's ready-to-wear for North America. And then I decided to kind of take a pivot and move into working for a startup, retail innovation startup, and ultimately ended up leaving New York and coming here to LA. And the reason why I want to kind of explain that part is because Stereotype came about because I want to find a way to essentially bridge something that I'm passionate about, which is fashion and the beauty that comes along with fashion expression, and also activism. In 2015, I reached out to Shola, who works in luxury retail, so he works for Hermes, and I said, I want to put together this digital photo series that basically allows us to take the narrative and rewrite our own narrative in our own way. So we are going to take the pen. Sometimes people talk about the story, they hold the pen for you. So this is our chance to hold our own pen and to tell our own story, and without any kind of permission, right? Because we did this all from scratch, we got to determine what it looked like, how it felt, what was the language that was associated with it. So it started out, as I mentioned, as a photo series in 2015. It branched out to include women, a few people who wanted to include themselves in this project. So it started in New York, but there's a group of men who did it in Alabama and Washington, D.C. There's a group in Texas. There was a group in Charlotte, North Carolina, and also as far as London. So there was an extension in London as well. And once I moved away, I decided to come back to New York because I miss it so much. I even miss it today. It's my favorite city on earth. And so I had reached out to Shola and said, hey, I want to continue to do Stereotype, but how can we do it in a way that feels elevated? What is our next evolution? How do we take this further? And at the time, there were 2 books that came out. One was Black Vanguard, and another one was called Black Boy Fly. And we essentially took a hybrid of 2 and created Stereotype. So we take the lives of in America, and we tell their stories through an editorial. So, and I like to say the photos is kind of consistent. Stories are what we live in a social media age where you see photos and you only think of the highlights. If we wanted to tell the truth stories, and I remember, Keith mentioned earlier that we've so many different topics as a part of this book. We wanted to ensure that it didn't highlight the beautiful parts of life, but the parts that we kind of struggle with, the parts that we're not always as excited to talk about, the vulnerability. And I think that's what makes it the project. And as Wendy said, she started out as a volunteer. Actually, I met her in COVID in 2020. I was holding a small get-together at a park. She was an uninvited guest. I love to tell the story. And I was like, who is this lady? It's COVID. I don't want anyone coming who we don't know. And it turned out to be actually one of the biggest blessings because we had such a great time. She came on as volunteer and ultimately took on a bigger role overseeing operations as well as creative direction.
You go ahead. That was a lot, and I didn't know that connection.
As I would like to say, God was guiding my steps, okay? I was already invited, so. But yeah, it's so funny every time we think about that because how everything turned out, I couldn't have changed it for anything, so yeah.
I agree with that 100%.
And it's, it's important to be at the right place at the right time and to be ready when you're in that position as well.
And as you mentioned quite frequently about that networking piece.
Oh, yeah.
Important about being in the right place, and you see how that has gone from that point all the way to the book that has been developed. So I think that's really important, especially talking to our FIT students as we are engaging. So I think that's a really important piece that I pull out just from that alone. So yeah, absolutely.
So this next question is for either one of you. What was the creative process? How did you go about creating the themes? And, how did fashion play a role in this creative process?
Yeah, so one of the main things, like Marquel said, we were highlighting people from different backgrounds. It wasn't just models or fashionistas, it was activists. It was, yes, we did have stylists, we had a dancer. So one of the main things that, I was doing in terms of the creative direction was how to elevate everyone in a way they've never been elevated. Most of the individuals that we highlighted, this was like their first time being talent. So, we had to either like what's comfortable, but also how can we give them an experience where they're like, man, I'm a dancer, but this feels amazing. I'm like in a book. And so for me, what I did, my process, I used a lot of words. Of course, they're dances, but I also wanted to figure out how do we incorporate like gifting them their moment. Flowers was a big theme throughout the book because it was the idea Marquel wanted to give flowers to all these individuals. And I always say this, that we do have amazing magazines that are out there. However, what TNS did is to really take our, some of the people that we know in our everyday life that they are killing it in their various metrons that they're being called to. However, we never really sit and think about, but what's their story? So this was a moment where we were able to elevate them as talent, but also really dig deep into their childhood, where they came from. And so for me, using words and really breaking down these words and figuring out how I want it to be and creating mood boards. And I do want to add, I did go to Parsons School of Design, so I did have to use my, my skills from Parsons, so no shade, hey y'all. But it really, really helped, like, being able to literally create anything from nothing, and that was like my task. And I was really privileged to really take on that role, because for me as a creative director, really aligned with the mission for TNS, which was to really take back the narrative and being able to tell our stories through our lenses, through our experiences, and really elevating all the individuals.
I love that. Would you like to add to that, Marquel?
Yeah, I think also just creative standpoint, there are a few things I'll show that are kind of like more tactical choices. So throughout the book, as an example, if you have an opportunity to peruse the book, you'll see that the cover is very intentional. The gray represents kind of like a blank slate. When you first open the book, it automatically goes into this chapter that is white, and that represents kind of like the purity of white, the absence of color. It then goes through Roy G. Biv, so red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, violet, and then it ends on black, so representing all the colors together. So there's some very intentional choices around the color spectrum of the book as well. Additionally, as Wendy mentioned, you'll see flowers quite often throughout the book. People photographed in different places. So we took photos in Los Angeles, here in Los Angeles, we took in Chicago, and the bulk of them also in New York. So it was very intentional about the choices that we made creatively for the book.
That's one thing that I also want to add to that. The book is amazing. If you guys can check it out for sure. But one word that you stated was about the narrative, right? It's about really taking control of the narrative so that you can, explain that, so that you can take control of that. And I think that's a really powerful message within that. And that's one sentiment that I really get when I look at the body of work, is just being able to see that outside of, and it's in a positive notion, it's in a positive space. And I think that's really important that we need to see, and I think that this type of book is important for that alone in itself. So I think that's really powerful with that.
But in addition to that, to complement that, I think the intentionality behind it is also really important, and is often, if I can say, like sometimes overlooked. It's almost as if
Exactly.
we can't be this intentional because it's going to offend people over here, or we can't be this intentional because it's going to offend people over there. And it's what I appreciate most is the intentionality behind it. My next question, and I think this would teeter on like pulling that thread around the intentionality, and that is when we think about the entrepreneurial aspect of this, how many iterations did you go through from the inception to the final product, and what was that process like?
Oh yeah, that's powerful for sure. Yeah.
Marquel, do you want to take that?
Sure. Yes. So, I mean, this journey was 3 years long. It was an incredibly long journey. And I think for me, one of the things that is a constant reminder for me is like, a dream or a goal delayed is still worth pursuit. I think sometimes when our timeline isn't as we originally anticipate, we become discouraged and maybe determine or make up in our minds that, this goal was lofty, it was amazing, it was beautiful, but it wasn't meant for me to do it. Sometimes it just takes a little bit longer. So I think that's one of the first things to note, that in any particular project or goal, that sometimes it may take a little bit longer, but it's still worthy of pursuit. And that's something that we kept top of mind when we were executing this book. I know we had a lot of great support with this book, but some of the challenges is that we did this book self-funded. We completely self-funded this book out of our own pockets, no loans, no investors. And so sometimes that takes a little bit longer as well. I mean, it gave us a creative license to be able to make all the choices that we wanted to make without having to answer to someone, but it also meant there were limitations on how fast that work was able to be completed. While I mentioned earlier, so I was a project director, Wendy was in charge of creative direction and digital operations, and Chola handled all the photography. But there's also Fred Kent, who handled the music graphic designer. So we wouldn't have been able to complete this book without working with him and bringing our images, the words together in a way that is so beautiful. In fact, Fred was the person who designed this cover. This wasn't the original design for the cover. It was going to be much more simple. He was the person who made it, that would be great. So there's a lot of collaboration and co-creating, I would say, in bringing this together. And so with that process, it took us 7 months close to 4 months, of actually completing the photography. Taking the photography, taking the words, and then bringing it to life in this format to then go to print. And once it went to print, it took us 8 weeks because we're working with a local printer here because we didn't have a publisher. That took iteration. So we had to first see what was called a book proof. And when I saw the first proof, I actually didn't like the quality of the book proof. So we had to change it from the original printer to a second one. For the process all over again, working with that particular printer. We saw the second book proof. We loved the quality of it, but we also needed to make some changes. So there's a binding here that you may not be able to see this book person. That's a black binding. Initially, this was red, so we had to go through make the further changes there and how we wanted the book to feel. The book is relatively heavy, so it's just over 5 pounds. So it's a pretty heavy book. It has 447 pages. It's 100-pound book, highest. Nearly the highest commercial available for photography books. And so going through all that process and determining took quite a time, but I'm really happy with where we ultimately landed in this body of work.
Another thing that I also want to add to that, I am an educator, and one of the things that I pull out of that message that you just stated is about when you're passionate about something, when it's something that you really want to do, and that's what we saw in their body of work. It took them 3 years, they funded themselves, and these are the types of things that we see within our students here at FIT, is something that you're passionate about, you really need to go out and make it happen as much as possible, and it's not going to be easy. And I think that's a really powerful message within that in itself.
Totally agree. And I think in with that in mind, it's figuring it out
That part.
as you go along, because it's not going to, yes, you have your sights on what the finished product might look like, but it may not look like that in the very beginning and as you go through the process. Can you highlight some of the challenges and some of the rewards as well that you guys experienced throughout this process?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, adding to the previous question, I think in even doing this project, it's really important to have a team that has the same vision because, again, this was self-funded, right? And so when delays are taking place, when it's not hitting the timeline that you were supposed to, you all have to be in unity with why you did it. And we wanted to change the narrative, the new stereotype. And so moments like that, we had to be like, why did we do this? And have to align with, of course, there's nature taking place, there's finances taking place, but we're still going to stick to it and be in as a team, because it's very easy to kind of like veer off if you're not in unity, because those trying times can really show character as well. So just add on.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the next question I really want to go to is, I know that you guys did completed over 26 editorials, if I'm correct,
Yep.
and you did it in multiple locations, I think New York City, Los
Correct.
Angeles,
Chicago,
Chicago,
LA, yep.
continue,
Yes.
right? Out of that, and as you guys can see, some of the body of work that you can see up here are some of the imagery that is actually in the book itself, and it's bodies of work that is written about that. Out of all of these, can you tell me some of them that are your favorites, or tell maybe a story behind some of them in regards to that?
Yeah, so I mean, the book is amazing. And of course, I have the book here as well. You guys will be able to see it as well. The stories are impeccable. Like, yes, the creative direction and the photography is beautiful, but really the whole goal, as I always say, was that how can I cause someone to look at an image and want to dig deeper? So one of the many favorites chapters is, I don't know if you guys know Harrison Cricht. He's a stylist, celebrity stylist, worked with
He's amazing, by the way.
Yeah, Queen Latifah. He's been featured in Access Hollywood and multiple publications. But the beautiful thing about us featuring him was, yes, you did an amazing, yes, thank you, Marquel. You're an amazing stylist, but let's dig a little bit deeper. And because one of the things in New York, I would say, when you introduce someone, when you're in a room and you're introducing each other, you're always like, the first thing that people ask you is like, oh, what do you do? And instantly that becomes like your label. You're instantly kind of kept in a box. But like the beautiful thing about us in TNS is that we were peeling off the layers. So Harrison, he grew up in a small town. His father's incarcerated. Of course, I'm not going to give all the tea, okay? Got to read the book. But just knowing that his journey to what even inspired him to pursue fashion, with how he grew up in the church, like, it's just a powerful story to me. And seeing how he's literally breaking barriers. And one of the cool thing about this is, I'm African, I'm Kenyan, and there's this reality show, it was called Being Bonang. Being Bonang is like this, she's a big socialite in South Africa. One time I was watching it, and she's like, oh, my stylist is coming from New York, and of course it's Harrison. But now I don't know Harrison at that moment. And then I'm working on TNS, I'm like, oh my God, this is Harrison. So it's just like a full circle moment for me as well. But that has to be one of my highlights for the book.
And that's one of many, right?
One of many.
One of many in that. I actually want to push it over to Marquel and kind of ask you a question in similarity. What you have unpacked this more, but if we could go a little bit deeper about what does TNS mean to you, and what has the stories meant to you? And let's put more emphasis about what the stories meant, like, and how, because when you hear the story, we were fortunate enough to go to their New York launch event. They just had one recently in LA this past Sunday. And you're able to see some of the participants that were in the book. You're actually able to see some of them and them talk about their stories, and it's even more profound and impactful in that way. So yeah, I would like to shoot it over to you, Marquel. Like, what has the stories meant to you, and just your thought process with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that my life largely has been and probably will be in service to other people. I think some of my happiest times is being able to amplify other people's missions, their goal, the things that they care about most. That friend that advocates for you. So if you tell me you want to see something come to life, bring it to fruition, I'll be the accountability partner who follows up. Like, where are you with this? What are our next steps? What does our work back schedule look like? How can I check in and help you be accountable, right? And I think for me, this book allowed me to do that in a large way. I'll take this chapter, for example, if you all can see this. This is Sapir. And what's beautiful about this is, I think this book for a lot of people also served as a form of therapy for them, because they had to do a lot of reflection, not only in what they wanted to share in their story, but how we brought their story to life. And Sapir's journey is about a love letter to her younger self. So this younger girl represents her when she was a kid, and all the weight that she carried and the things that she told herself that were probably falsehoods, and really reclaiming her. And for me, that is what it is to me. providing a platform for people to be celebrated, to be loved, to receive flowers, and for more people to learn about their stories and have, hopefully, after reading the story, they feel a little bit more encouraged and a bit more light in their day.
I'm definitely encouraged after I've seen some of them, so I absolutely agree with that sentiment. You're going to say something? Wendy?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, in terms of even like, Marquel elevating and advocating for others, I think one of the things that I have to also add in terms of it's Black History Month, and one of the main things is when I worked with Marquel and Shola is just being elevated and advocated for as a Black woman, because a lot of times it feels like we always have to go above and beyond in proving our our worth. And so one of the things, even from Marquel, he truly advocates, guys. Like, I think I can't even say enough. Like, he will advocate for you for sure. And one of the highlights, I know you asked like working together or like the difficulties, but one of the things that I personally can say is that it's been great to be uplifted and because this was my first creative direction like job project, and it's been amazing. And I did need a little affirmation here and there, because they're tough. Don't get it twisted. They wanted excellence.
We all do need affirmation every now
Yes,
and then.
and the team was excellent. Every time I presented, I almost was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. But it's just like, as much as you
did it though, Wendy.
Yes,
You did.
and that's the thing. It's like
guys did.
it's like it was great to know like they affirmed that there's greatness in me constantly, and so just putting out there, it was great to have people who are uplifting me at the same time.
And before Don goes, that saying, you got to find your tribe, right? You got to find your tribe, that people that encourage you and push you.
Yes.
I know that for Marquel, for sure. Marquel is that type of person.
Yes.
He pushes you. He strives for excellence.
Absolutely.
And you need those type of people in your corner to be able to help you get to that type of work with that. So shout out to you, Marquel.
So I want to ask this question. I hope not to receive a cliche response. And I know this is challenging because it's different for everybody. But what advice would you give for students who want to venture off and create something that's never been created, to launch something because they have this burning desire inside of them? It's one thing to say, don't give up. Yes, of course, don't give up. But what advice can you give beyond words of don't give up, or the words of encouragement like that? There has to be something that will motivate you, that
What's
will move
driving you.
Yeah, what's driving you? Like, how do you tap into that in order to produce a product like this?
I'm gonna go first, and then I know Marquel has a great answer. It's so funny because when I hear this, I also honestly relate it to myself too on the other projects that I feel like I would like to do. And I would personally say to myself, and even for you guys, is just be sure of what that is and write it down, figure out your why, right? Figure out your true motive, because at times when you are about to do something, your motivation might not be the right thing. For example, you may want to go to school, but the only reason you're doing that, might not be a great, we're in school.
Right, yeah.
I mean, like, for example, I only say that because I'm African. There are certain things that I have wanted to do prior, or felt like I had to, but it was because of title. So for example, I was previously a pre-med major. Why? Because my parents wanted me to be a doctor. Because of the title, they can say, oh, my daughter is a doctor. But like, what was the motive? Is that my calling? No. So really having to define, who are you really? What are your giftings? How are those like solving an issue, right? Because there's something that kind of irritates all of us. And I believe that that's the way that you are called to solve that thing. So having to figure out what that is and sticking to that. And I'm going to take this from Marquel. What he always says is set a date. I think setting a date is great, and then it forces you to kind of work backwards. And that's what I would say. But really, really figure out why you want to do something should fuel you. And of course, even when you set a timeline, be flexible of what takes place in the natural, because so many things can take place. You might be pushed back, but still keep pursuing that journey.
That was powerful, and I want to add a couple more layers to that. Finding that why, I think, is very important, right? And I think that even here at FIT, even for students, is you have to find that purpose. Like and it takes time. I've had my share of it, Dawn has as well. So I think it's important to really like narrow that down, and it's not easy. It never had meant to be easy, and I think you have to keep pushing for that. So I think that's a really powerful message, yeah.
Yeah, there is one question during school applications that it asks, what matters to you most and why? And I think if you can answer that, you're able to really
That part.
filter what really matters to you most and be able to kind of like tie in everything that you're passionate about, especially if you're multifaceted. I think that's always like a struggle for a lot of people. But there's a way that you can sit and figure out what matters to you most and being able to tie your talents to pursue that which you want.
Marquel?
Marquel?
Yeah, so I would say I want to give two answers. One is a little bit more cliche, but I think it's a great reminder, which is just, being comfortable with rejection. It's going to happen. It happens throughout our lives all the time. It will never stop. It's going to be one of those constant things where things may not work out that you intend. You want to try an idea, you want to go a certain place, you want to do something by a certain time, you're not able to do that. So I think being comfortable spaces and the ambiguity of spaces is helpful. But the second thing that's a little less cliche, and I think that's important, is that, whenever we're children, we have this imagination that's unbridled, right? There are no limits to that imagination. And as we get older and we experience a little bit of rejection and we experience a little bit of reality, we tend to diminish or dim that imagination. And so I invite you to tap into that inner child that did not see limits, that thought they could run as faster than anyone else, jump higher than anyone else, go anywhere they want to in the world, because to a degree that inner child is right. It is true. And I think about when we did this project, and I think about the projects that I want to do in the future, tapping it allows me to do things that probably seem crazy. I mean, I think at some point, if you would have told me that we were going to produce this book from scratch and all the money that it was going to take and all the coordinating parts and all the movement, and then we do a launch event in New York that we sold out, and then we do a launch event in LA just a few weeks later that had tons of people come to that. It might seem like it's too much work. There's no way, tap into your reality. But I tap into my inner child to say, why not? Because we often ask ourselves, what if it fails? But what if it works? We should entertain that idea just as much as we entertain what if it fails. So that's what I would say would be super helpful in pursuing an entrepreneurial pursuit, especially along the lines of innovation, one that hasn't been done or it is rare, it's an anomaly, is because people will challenge it. They will have questions about it. But if you believe it, tap into that inner child, move around the resources that make most sense for you. I'm sure you have a supportive community and a tribe, as Keith mentioned earlier, and then go after it.
All of the above, right? We could talk about this all day. We have a time frame, of course, but we're gonna switch it over to Q&A. But before we get into that basis, I really wanted to see where you guys share with them where they can follow you, where they can find information about you, things of that nature. So if you could share a little bit of information. And also, are we gonna have a book number 2, perhaps? I wanted to throw that out there as well.
Okay, so you can definitely follow us at the New Stereotype to keep up with the journey on Instagram, and also there's a link also to purchase books if you feel led to. Book number 2, listen, I always tell Marquel that I'm ready, but I'm also really, really passionate to turn this into a film. But of course,
okay.
The biggest thing, as shared earlier, is funding. This was self-funded. But it would be amazing to just have partners say like, hey, I believe in this and let's do it. Let's go on a world tour or a series, because these stories are so, so powerful. And when you read them, you really do connect with them. So, yeah.
So are you going to bring it here to FIT when you guys do the film?
To be determined.
Right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Marquel. And we want to open it up to you guys if you guys have any questions that you would like to ask.
So you mentioned that you want to do like a film or something, but where do you see this project going? Let's say 2 years down the line, even 5 years, but like the future, besides for a film.
That's a great question.
So
Go ahead.
go ahead. I think there are a myriad of places that I believe that we can see it going. And I think going back to my question from the prompt earlier about tapping into the inner child, that's why I feel so confident answering that question, right? So Wendy mentioned that she wanted to explore some form of film and or stage play. I would love for us to have some level of a permanent residency with some of these images. I would also love to partner with a fashion magazine to do a monthly installment celebrating these stories as well. So to me, those are the three clear indications of ways that we can bring these stories to more people. I would also be open to a traveling exhibition of sorts where we, if it's not stationary in one place, then we take it to a few places throughout the US and a few other places that are impacted by the diaspora, i.e. Brazil, Lagos, London, Paris, many places. So to me, those.
Any additional questions? Yeah.
Hi. I was just wondering if you guys came across any hurdles during your creative process, you know, in like the beginning, fleshing the ideas out for the book before even starting it, and how you could have came over those.
Yeah, I mean, I can tap into that. So I would say the hurdles are that I personally, I guess, ran into sometimes would be having like a vision and then the execution process sometimes did not turn out the way I imagined. And some of the chapters we had to do twice or 3 times because it was not giving the quality or the excellence that we wanted to run into. And I would also say, like, again, this was self-funded, so I had a particular budget. And so I would say that's also a hurdle, but we did make work what we had. So that's definitely some of the hurdles. In terms of like creative process, I don't know, I had a way that I was executing with words or making mood boards, so it wasn't too hard. It was more so like, how do we actually execute the vision that I'm seeing? So sometimes that was like the hiccups that I would run into, for
And
sure.
can I add this really quick? You're working full-time as well, right? We
Yeah.
have a full-time job, and we're doing this on the side. So I think you have to navigate within that space as
Yes,
well.
yes.
So yeah, I wanted to add that to your hurdle list.
Yeah, and I think like even to add that, I think in general we were all going through life, you know, besides work, besides family. There's things that was always happening, and just bringing it back to my whole point about like having to be united in the vision is really helpful, because I think sometimes, you know, a lot of things can happen. The rejections that he's talking about can really just like want to cause you to eject quickly, but you just have to know why you're doing this and trust that the audience that you feel is going to be filled with this project is literally waiting for you to finish.
So I think we have time for just maybe one more
Yeah.
question.
And that was a great question, by the way. Thank you.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, I mean, there's so many different ways to present this format, like stories with an image. What kind of led you guys down to the decision of doing a book as opposed to maybe a blog or a novel? Yeah.
That's a Marquel question.
That feels like a Marquel, yeah.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I was having some difficulty hearing the latter end of the question.
Yeah. What inspired you to turn these stories into a book rather than, say, a blog or a short film series or so on?
Okay, I understand now. Thank you for repeating. That's a great question. And the simple answer to that is that this book, this body of work will live beyond any of us that's in it, any of us that made it. It is our hope that this book is passed down from these people who are in it to their grandchildren, their grandchildren's grandchildren. And to me, you know, that tangible kind of feeling feels good in a way. I think about, you know, I was born in 1987, so I turned 37 next month. And sorry, we're not in March yet, in April, I turned 37. And, you know, I think back to when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, how, I would see like physical photos of my mother and the fashion that she wore, and her hairstyles, and the music and everything. It feels better, and I understand we're in a digital age, and we'll always have that format. But to be able to feel the photo, to touch the photo, brings a feeling that I don't think can be duplicated in a digital format. So I think having something you can actually touch and feel, whenever it's passed down to other people, they'll be able to feel a little bit of their life in those pages, and that's why we.
Thank you.
But don't worry, film is coming.
That part. You guys, thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for coming to join us. This was a really great conversation. Thank you, Marquel. Thank you, Wendy. Thank Don. Yes?
Where can they follow?
Oh, follow. Yes.
The
I'll
new
give you that.
Stereotype.
Mhm.
The new
you.
Stereotype on Instagram.
Website, all of the above.
Yeah, there is a link on our Instagram. You can also click that to know more. You can buy prints, you can buy the book, and just keep up with us.
Yes. And as we stated before, these are some of the imagery that you can purchase, correct?
Correct.
So they are available in the book itself, and we'll be able to show that to you guys afterward. So once again, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and you guys have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marquel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marquel.